Good afternoon, everybody. What's going on? My name is Michelle Miller, known as the Farm Babe on social media. I'm a voice for agriculture online in the social media realm as an online influencer, writer, columnist, public speaker, all that good stuff. So I'm excited today, though, to be a moderator for the panel of these lovely folks, the faces of future, the faces of ag innovation, the future of food. It's great to be here with Farm Credit is who's sponsoring the panel today. And so just to go ahead and kick it off, I'm going to do some brief introductions with our panelists. The first one, I'm actually going to go from this end and back. So the first person on our panel is Dave Button from Row Shaver. So Dave grew up on the family farm near in the middle of central Kansas, and after spending nearly 30 years of his adult life in the aviation industry, eventually found his way back to the farm. Wheat, corn, soybeans, grain sorghum, and alfalfa are the main crops he grows, and getting back to the farm had its challenges, specifically with weeds. Spraying herbicides in Kansas with their noxious winds often feels impossible. Mix that with the ever-increasing weed resistance to herbicides, and something had to be done to address both problems. So, after a period of design, development, and testing on his own and neighbors' crops, the Row Shaver and Row Trimmer were born. So next we have Matt Beckwith, who is the CEO and co-founder of Rantizo, a precision ag company working to make aerial application by drone legal, painless, convenient, and more productive. So in his day-to-day role at Rantizo, Matt brings to life his deep-rooted commitment to helping farmers. Matt was raised on his grandfather's farm and learned to drive a tractor at age 9. So he was a late bloomer. Matt has a degree from Harvard, and a fun fact about him is that he spent 12 years in Southeast Asia developing and selling rice to Vietnamese farmers. So pretty cool. Next, we've got Heidi Couch from Farm Credit Services of America. And Heidi grew up on a swine and row crop farm in northeast Nebraska and was involved in 4-H and was the president of her local FFA chapter. So she gave a speech at the Nebraska FFA convention on the power of the Farm Credit cooperative model and the innovations that Farm Credit was championing for rural America. So 20 years later, here she is, still championing that cause and still on that train with Farm Credit. So she's been with Farm Credit about 3.5 years, and as her role as the innovation manager with Farm Credit, she works to collaborate with the best in ag tech to solve some of farmers' biggest challenges. So next we've got Ben and Chad. Chad Johnson is the CEO of Grainweevil, and his son here, Ben Johnson, is the Chief Innovation Officer. So this father-son duo has an interesting story of how they came to the Grainweevil technology. So Chad actually has over 20 years of informal science education experience, including exhibit design, curriculum development, and program facilitation. And Ben recently graduated with a degree in electrical engineering in the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and serves on the board for the Youth Engaged in Technology and Innovation nonprofit organization, and often mentors robotic programs throughout Nebraska. So the Grainweevil is a grain bin safety and management robot that directly engages the surface of the grain. We all know grain bins are dirty, dangerous workplaces. So the Grainweevil keeps that farmer with a shovel out of the bin by leveling, breaking crusts, doing inspections, and feeding grain into the extraction augers. So that's a little bit about our panels, and we'll go ahead and kind of kick it off with a little bit more information, what they actually do. We've got some videos and a little bit of information here to share with y'all. Starting with Matt from Rantizo. And it looks like we're out of sound, so Matt, you have to sing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This is just some imagery of our drones flying. They're great for spraying fields when you can't get into a field. When it's too small to take your ground rig into, the drones can get over the top and apply whatever you need. And we put all of the pieces together to get the drone, the training, the support, so that drone is flying. Not excitingly, but very importantly, all of the compliance aspects so that people are flying safely. It's important to the farmer, it's important to to the communities around the farms.
Excellent. And next we have Rose Shaver with Dave Button.
We do have a little sound there, obviously. The row shaver, I can blame the invention of AutoSteer on making me develop the row shaver. A lot of time in the cab of a tractor, watching weeds go by that we couldn't kill with herbicides, made me realize we've got to do something about it. So we came up with a system, a two-part system. The first part is the row shaver that cleans weeds out from in between the rows. The second part is called the row trimmer, literally a combine header with just a sickle bar and a small reel, and that cleans the flowers, the velvet leaf, anything that comes up over the top of the crop, cleans that up. You got to remember, we're not in the business to kill weeds. We're in the business to get rid of herbicide-resistant weed seeds that are going to be your problem next year and next year and next year.
Excellent. And next we have Grain Weevil with Chad and Ben Johnson.
So the idea for this robot came from an idea from a family friend of ours. Neither of us had a background in agriculture, as you heard. We were building a project for a different industry, just as a side project for me before heading off to college. And he saw that robot that we had built and said, if you can build that, you can build a robot to keep my kids out of the grain bin. We had no idea what that entailed at the time, but we started brainstorming and working on it and doing our thing, building robots, and came up with this device that can do anything you can do in a bin with a shovel. And we're working on the broom as well, so we'll get there eventually, so you don't have to sweep either.
Excellent, thanks guys. And you had the best walkout song of all,
Yes.
of all the videos. And then lastly, we've got Heidi from Farm Credit.
Hi there, I'm Heidi Couch, and I serve on our strategy and innovation team as an innovation manager. And so in my role, no 2 days are the same, much like the producers that we serve, but we work closely with the ag tech ecosystem to help be the conduit to connect these really amazing innovations and entrepreneurs that are solving some pretty challenging problems in rural America, and they're bringing some really progressive solutions back to our rural communities. So it's really an honor to be able to serve the Farm Credit system in this capacity and connect our producer owners and all of rural America to ag tech innovations that we're seeing.
Excellent, thanks so much. So I'm sure everybody in this room knows more than anybody just all of the crazy challenges that we deal with every day on our farms, whether that's trade wars, rising input costs, labor shortages, resistant weeds, supply chain disruptions. We could go on and on. But time and time again, we've also seen innovation and technology rise up to help farmers and overcome these challenges. So I'd like to go ahead and kick off the discussion here with the question of, what do you guys think is the biggest challenge that farmers face today?
I'm the only farmer of the group, so I guess I'll start off. This year is probably one of the most challenging years I have ever seen in my life. Now the grain prices that have soared in the last couple of weeks, they're great, but they will come down eventually. The biggest problem that we've got, though, in our part of the world, I'm out of Great Bend, Kansas. Biggest problem we see is getting inputs and the price of inputs, fertilizer especially. Herbicides, chemicals, they're going to be the toughest thing to manage this year.
What about you,
So
Michael?
I think that, when a farmer or a producer is busy, like, the challenge is manageable. But what I see as the most frustrating thing is when there's a problem and they can't do anything about it. And I think about my grandfather. Every summer he'd go through this seasonally induced insomnia when like about July to August, like, he could see the crops, they were growing, they were usually doing all right, but all he could do is worry about them. And that's part of like what brought us to Motivated Rantizo is, we wanted something that enabled farmers to do something about the issues in their field, like late in the season when, the crop is almost there, but you just want to get it over the line. And so the inability to act when there's a problem is sort of one of the challenges that I see a number of farmers struggling with.
I think when we talk about, or we talk to our producer owners, those challenges that have the likelihood to impact the physical, the financial, and even the emotional well-being of the producer and that entity is what's really challenging. I think producer wellness is very important, and that's beyond just physical and mental health. That also includes financial wellness as well. So I think those are some of the challenges that we're seeing, specifically labor challenges. This is probably not new to anybody in this room, but labor challenges are really heightened right now. Any disruptions with supply chain, rising input costs, geopolitical type environments that we're in, these are really challenging times. The great news is that I think agriculture is the most resilient industry in the absolute world. And so there, time and time again, producers have been resilient and they've overcome these challenges. And I think access to competitive working capital, access to holistic risk management plans, and innovation are really kind of a three-pillar kind of stool that can help solve some of these challenges.
I think for us, one of the things that we see a lot is the safety side, obviously, and there's a lot of great discussion happening right now in the ag industry about farm safety, and we're trying to play a part in that as well, and there's a lot of focus being turned to the grain bins as well, and we think that it's an important conversation to have because we put our grain in the bins and we're storing them there, and we're trying to take care of this massive bank of grain, and a lot of times when something goes wrong, it's just easy to take care of that, to grab a shovel and get in there and take care of the problem, whatever's happening. But it's really fun and interesting to see these different solutions that are coming to that space, and improving that process that has been the same for quite a long time. We have there's some new things coming out that are really, really interesting. And it's very exciting to see that focus on safety in that aspect as well.
And I think as we look at the safety and the labor and all of the aspects that kind of are our mission for our robot, we also look at young kids like Ben, who we never grew up on a farm. I'd never been in a grain bin before. He'd never been in a grain bin before. But here we are in ag, and I think it's really important for us to demonstrate that opportunities in ag also now include technology, electrical engineers and robotic engineers and folks that may have never seen ag as a career choice. So I think that's an important piece of all of this puzzle is how are we addressing that younger generation coming back to the farm and managing in a different way.
Absolutely. I love that perspective. It's so true to get more and more people excited and understand what it is we do on our farms and really kind of cross over and open our arms to more and more people that can help with the tech. So I really love all y'all's perspective on getting involved with that. So when we talk about these challenges and the technology, what do you guys see as far as the innovations that you guys have created? How do you think that helps farmers tackle these issues overall?
Guess I'll go again.
You're the farmer.
As a farmer, weeds is probably one of the biggest things that's near and dear to my heart. We've had so many advancements in technology with all of our GMO products that it made farming easy. I'll admit, I've used more Roundup in the world than anybody else and had great success with it. Unfortunately, Mother Nature thought otherwise, and it's beginning to creep into a lot of the other technologies, the dicamba products, the Liberty products, that at some point there's not going to be anything available for us. So a lot of the new old technology, I guess would be the way to put it, is having to be revitalized. Our system is dirt simple, quite honestly, but it's effective, and that's the kind of thing that we're going to need to bridge America's farmers over into whatever the next new technology is. And there's There's stuff I've heard about on the drawing board, but, you know, with the EPA timelines and restrictions, you're looking at 12, 15 years before anything really comes to fruition. So we're just trying to bridge that gap and keep America as successful as we can be.
Yeah, I mean, I look at technology on the farm and I think, is it making a difference? And some of my former colleagues are here, and I was doing satellite imagery analytics, and it was so cool on a screen. And then you'd get to a farmer and they're like, look, you can see exactly what's happening in your fields, and it just didn't matter. It didn't help them, it didn't solve a problem that they were having on their farm. And so I think technology has to be relevant. To be relevant, it has to be actionable, it has to be easy. And so I think that's an industry challenge. It's like, you know, there's infinite cool ideas, but there's only so many hours in the day. And so you've got to make those ideas dead simple and easy to implement. And only then does technology matter. Otherwise, it could be concept art, like in a museum or a gallery, but it doesn't have a place on the farm. And so let's make it simple. Let's solve a real problem. And that's where technology, like that's where it has legs.
I would agree with Dave and Matt. I think agriculture has never been so complex, yet agriculture is never going to be as simple. And so ag tech and innovations in technology can really work to solve complex problems in a really simplistic way. It can also add a lot of noise. And so I think it's really important that producers really need to evaluate what are the solutions that these technologies can bring to their operations, and then how can that really return on investment back into that operation, because you don't want to just digitize or innovate for the sake of innovating. It really has to solve a problem, and it has to, again, do that in a simplistic way that's really meaningful back to the producer.
On the simplicity side, as someone who is very passionate about robotics, you know, a lot of times my brain goes to how can I build a robot to fix this problem? But a lot of times that's not necessary. There are some instances like the grain bin that I believe, you know, the complex tasks that we're trying to solve inside of there are benefited by this technology that couldn't have been created 5 years ago. You know, we wouldn't have been able to build the robot that we're using today without the technology that has grown in the last couple years. And I think that there's a lot more opportunity for things like that, but I would implore people who are interested in that to keep it simple. Our robot is complex, but if you look at it, it's 2 augers, 2 motors, and it just drives on the surface of the grain. And we're able to do a lot of really interesting things with that, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there on the farm to do some pretty awesome things with robotics.
And I think, you know, as we try to solve a problem, I mean, we were given our challenge, hey, we need to stay out of a grain bin and build us a robot. That's a great place to start. But I think one of the most important aspects, and probably of all of our innovations, is farmer input. And so figuring out how farmers participate in early stage innovation is extremely important. We've been very, very fortunate to sometimes we claim that it's nice that we don't know anything because we can't assume anything about a grain bin, so we have to ask questions. We have to go find a farmer and say, hey, what do you think? How could we solve this? What is this problem? So it's extremely important in this whole world of ag innovation that our producers be a part of the early innovation process. Find someone like us that can build robots and then help us, tell us, oh, that's crazy, that'll never work. Oh, here, come test it in my bin. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that folks in the ag industry can help innovation by just being open to sharing and being a part early on, I think is an important piece.
For sure. I love that. It's so true and so important. The grain weevil kind of reminds me of the D-Bot in a way. It's like my robotic vacuum that just runs across the floor. It's pretty cool. But you know, I often wonder this, right? Like we're living in this tech-savvy society. You know, people wait in line forever for the latest iPhone or the Tesla or what's Elon Musk up to, you know. And it's so interesting because when you think of the average person, they might be like, oh, farmers, you know, just like the bib overalls and the straw hat. You know, it's kind of like this perception that we are such a tech-savvy industry, but at what point do we say, all right, let's take the farmer that just wants to be working outside on the tractor and doing things by hand, and you're crossing over to this robotics tech space. How have you guys seen farmers take to it? Like, has there been a lot of willingness to learn, and have you had to sit down with them? How have you kind of overcome some of these maybe hesitations behind crossing into the tech space?
You'd be surprised how many
Yeah?
farmers are ready and willing to take on a lot of the new
Awesome.
technology. The labor issue is the biggest problem that technology can solve for us, and it has. And our equipment's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, requires less and less labor, a lot more skill than it used to be, but you'd be amazed at how many farmers want to learn that stuff. They know that the only way they're going to pass this farm down to the children is to keep it running and profitable. It's not the old days where you'd go out and milk a couple cows and take it to town. Farming is a huge business these days. It is, and it's got problems that most of you, I don't know, show of hands, how many guys are actually farmers? All right, you understand me then. Farmers have to be a weatherman. You've got to be a mechanic. You've got to now be a technician. You've got marketing expert. You've got so many hats that you have to wear that technology is now becoming your way of life. And honestly, the cell phone was the biggest.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That I can get so much business done sitting out on a tractor and
It is crazy.
and auto steer. That's my friend. And I can get so much business done in a day. It's incredible. So technology is catching on a lot faster than most of us really realize. It's just happening.
That's awesome.
When I think about innovation on the farm, I'm like, are we actually doing as much as like our fathers and grandfathers before us did? Because there was always tinkering on the farm. It was like, bending metal to make the combine do whatever you needed it to do. And so a lot of that was happening. And then with software, like that can't happen on the farm. But the through line between the two is, 30, 40, 50 years ago, people were solving like whatever problem that they were, like it was the burr in their saddle. That's what they had to fix. And so, again, to be relevant, we got to think about like what's the problem, and then we solve that problem for a grower, and it's relevant. And so that's how I think we try and maintain the pace, is try and as Chad was saying, like understand those issues. And I guess Dave has an advantage on the rest of us, but that's how we continue to make the impact. It's going to the source.
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone on the panel has said. When at Farm Credit Services America, when we are working to test an innovation, we love to go to our producer owners. We will talk to producers that may not even be a customer of ours. And I just think there's something in agriculture's DNA. There's just a stewardship to community to help each other out. And so there's just engaging and building those relationships and seeking that feedback. I know Chad mentioned that a little bit earlier on our panel, is that producer feedback is really critical. But I think we have to be really respectful, because producers have a lot of obligations. They have a lot of hats. There's golden hours. So we don't want to be overwhelming and asking a lot of questions. We want to learn really fast as well. But if we can clearly articulate what we're trying to solve, what could be the potential value proposition, and if we can articulate that and they can help us solve that, I think that's where there's really value that comes in those innovations, because kind of a high tide floats all boats. And so we're all in this industry together and we want to see each other succeed. There's room for everybody in the industry, and innovation is one of the ways that we can ensure that producer prosperity.
I got nothing. My whole goal is just to keep my ears open and listen and make sure that what we're doing isn't adding any stress to the already tough job that it is. It's a lot of work, and a robot that doesn't work is much worse than just jumping in. So that's our goal right now, is to make it easy enough to use.
I mean, I think part of when we give our big pitch and talk about our robot and talk about competition, there's obviously a lot of choices farmers can make. In a grain bin, the biggest competition is the farmer with a shovel and a can-do attitude, right? It's are we building a device that makes that can-do attitude still make the choice of safety and staying out of the bin? And I think that's part of the exciting piece of this is nobody really likes to go into a grain bin. So you pick a terrible job and build a tool that helps there. But I think it guides our development, knowing how resilient and I'm going to get the job done because it has to get done because it's how I make my living attitude. They go into these situations to get stuff done, and we have to build tools to help them get stuff done, and then they like them.
For sure.
If they don't get stuff done, they don't like them. It's pretty simple business, right?
Sure.
So.
So we are going to have a lot of time for Q&A, but I would also be curious to hear kind of from you guys when you do speak up during the Q&A is kind of like, which aspects of technology are you most excited about or currently using on your farms? You think about all these different product areas that we see every day, whether that's drones, artificial intelligence, or robots, biologicals. Which product areas do you think that we're seeing the most advancements in agriculture overall, or where are we headed in the next decade?
Boy, no, that's a good one.
I know, right? There's so much.
There is so much technology coming at us from every aspect, from the seed to the machine we use to put it in the ground, to the combine we cut it with, and systems of how we go about farming. Every part of the country, I've seen lots of different systems on farming. Every one of them works in your area. So to sum it up into one little thing, it's just the simplicity of making the system work where you live. That's it.
Yeah, I would say, technology is coming from a lot of different places, but it's make the farmer better. I see, some hype videos for technologies, nothing on this stage, and it's like the robot is going to do everything in the field, which sounds great until that robot dies and you can't find it, until it's stuck in your combine and you're down for 2 days in the nice harvesting weather. And so that's not thinking about how to make the farmer more effective. The farmer and the producer is the center of the farm. And so any technology that's relevant, I'm getting at risk of being repetitive, is solving their problems. It's helping them in their intelligence and their knowledge of their land and their operation be better and more effective. And so it all kind of comes out from the farmer at the center.
I know today we were talking a lot about technology innovations in agriculture, and I think we can all agree that there is just an absolute wave of digitization and innovation happening in agriculture. And when all of that innovation and digitization is entering this industry, it has created just an absolute tsunami of data. But we know not all data is created equal. And so I think we're going to see some real wins in the marketplace with ag tech and innovations that can kind of prove their value statement if they can somehow transcribe that data between whether it's AI or machine-backed learning to offer producers and ag retailers and any stakeholder in the agriculture industry that can synthesize that data into meaningful insights. And if those insights can help producers make data-driven decisions, that's where I think we're going to see some kind of immediate wins in the marketplace. Somebody recently told me, this was probably before they filled up recently with gas, but they said data is the new oil. And I think that was a really powerful statement because I agree. I think there can be some really meaningful insights if we just learn how to mine that data from all of this innovation technologies to help us be able to make data-driven and better decisions that are more leading. So we know, if I make this decision, these are the outcomes that I'm going to see on my operation.
I would say that I am very interested and sucked into the idea of the fully autonomous farm. I'm sure some of you have probably seen some stuff on that. And it's really interesting for my robotics brain and the automation and how cool that possibility way down in the future of fully autonomy. But I think it's going to be a combination. There will always be that farmer at the center, like you said, and the job might change, and it's continuing to change over time. But as long as we keep the farmer at the center, and as the technology people, as we focus on what the needs are, I think that it's going to be good, and I think that it'll continue to grow and be better for the producer.
So I think if you look back, I mean, we had the Industrial Revolution. We've had just gone through what I would call a big software revolution where everything was software. Now we're kind of going through this data revolution. And very soon we're going to realize that data doesn't matter as much as what you do with that. And having machines that are intelligent, that actually can manipulate and function inside of an environment and do the work using that data is extremely valuable. That's the workforce, that's the safety, it goes into almost all of these problems, sustainability. It all comes from, can you build a machine that can now collect the data and do work at the same time? And that's kind of that next phase. We've got software stuff, you got your apps, we got the data collection. It's coming in a bigger wave, but now what are those machines, are you going to be able to, whatever that task is that makes you stop when you're planting, well, the machine's going to figure out how to clean that out or do that job for you to make that everything more efficient. So it's the machines that are going to do things on top of that data now, I think is going to be the next big piece.
For sure. It's so interesting to see like how far we've come and where we're going and just how much power we have in our back pockets with our smartphones. Shifting gears a little bit, Heidi, I'd like to ask you this question with regards to Farm Credit. You're an innovation manager, right? So when you think of the title innovation manager, you have a really unique perspective on ag tech. Tell us a little bit more about your role, how Farm Credit really supports that ag tech and innovation.
Perfect. The Farm Credit System, one of the probably the most impactful ways that the Farm Credit System is supporting this ecosystem of innovators and entrepreneurs is something called the Rural Business Investment Program. And so that was established in the 2002 Farm Bill, but it really gained traction in 2012 with some regulatory rewriting of the 2012 Farm Bill. And so through that program, the Farm Credit System has actually invested over $900 million worth of capital into rural entrepreneurs, much like on our panel today, that are bringing solutions back to rural America. And those solutions are employing our youth, they're employing our rural, just the backbone of American agriculture in rural America. So that's one way that the Farm Credit System is supporting innovation within the agriculture industry. Another way is we really want to be a conduit to help support, market, possibly partner. You can define partnership in a lot of different ways, but if there's anything that we can help build a relationship or a connection. Agriculture is an industry based on handshakes and relationships, and that is really true. No matter how much we innovate and we digitize something, relationships still mean a lot. So we are very mission-based to connect rural America and the producers that we serve to any of ag entrepreneurs that might be solving a problem or have an innovation that may help an operation be more prosperous, more efficient, or more safe. That's just the kind of the role that we want to play. As far as my role as an innovation manager, that's pretty ambiguous. Every day is different, but what we like to do is we focus a lot on consumer trends because we know where the consumer goes, so will agriculture eventually. So we try to look out to see what are some of those consumer mega trends and how are they going to permeate into the industries that we serve, and how can we use that information to help educate our producers and our associations to kind of be on that right side of change. We know change is coming. The pace of change seems to accelerate every single day. So if we can kind of look at what are those evolving consumer preferences and how might that kind of shape the future of agriculture, and then how can we communicate that story back to the producers that we're serving? Those are some of the work streams that we do on our innovation team at Farm Credit.
That's super interesting. So what are some of those big emerging trends, you think?
Yeah, definitely. We touched a little bit on this about, I think that predictive analytics is like, how do you take that data and make that into really meaningful insights? We're seeing a lot of innovations in that space. Sensors are huge, that real-time data. Autonomy is really big as we continue to kind of be in this labor challenge. Biologics, we are seeing huge innovations when it comes to re-innovating, biologics, herbicides. Those are some of the biggest innovations that we're seeing. I know Matt talked a little bit about drones. We're going to continue to see autonomy through drone technology. Those are probably the biggest innovations that I think are kind of on that next horizon in agriculture.
Very cool. Question for you, Dave, as the main farmer here on the panel. When you think of technology on your farm, I'm assuming you're a multiple generation farmer, right? Yeah. How many for you?
Just 3.
3? Okay. But you think about what it was like as a kid and what you're going into now, and so much has changed.
Night and day.
Right. So what do you see in the future, right? Like if you could wave a magic wand and you could come up with like the next big thing to really help you on the farm, what are those pain points, or what would you magically love to have?
Actually, I've actually got it right now.
Okay.
It's called air conditioned cab. That was,
Absolutely.
in my opinion, that was the number one thing in the world. But it's the amount of work that each one of us can get done in a day has quadrupled in the 40 years that I've been even introduced into farming. What my dad, 2 brothers, a couple cousins, what they all farmed back in the 60s and 70s, I farm today by myself.
Yeah, it's crazy.
With a couple
right?
of guys that help me drive, trucks and whatnot during harvest. But it's the amount of productivity that we can continue to improve upon, and all of the technical advances are the things that are going to help us do that. We've made quantum leaps since the 50s in what can be produced. Now we're getting down to that fine tuning. How do we get 2%? How do we get 5%? How do we get 3%? And it's just those little incremental steps that we're going to start seeing today. The big magic wand, world peace is the only thing I can
Right.
see that's going to help us.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
It's always something, right? You're like, oh,
It's
China, then
ever
it's
the best.
COVID, now it's Russia and Ukraine, and so
name it.
there's always something like, what's next? We're gonna have to like have a bingo card, like what's next on the farm. But let's go ahead and open it up to you guys. We would love to hear from you. What sort of comments and questions do you guys have?
It's so overwhelming some days. You don't turn TV on.
Who's got a question? Yes.
So with your ag innovations, what is your biggest challenge having your invention on every farm in America?
Great question. I'll repeat it in case not everybody heard it. As far as having the ag innovations, what was the biggest challenge to trying to get it on like every farm in America, right? Did I summarize that right? Okay.
I think if I look at it from a Rantizo perspective, it's like systems have to work together. Like if your tractor doesn't talk to your drone and everything's just kind of like running its own thing, it doesn't work because it's just a confusing mess. And so like one of the things that we worry a lot about at Rantizo is simplifying the system and making all the pieces of drone spraying work together. You got to do like 100 different things and only one of them have any value, and that's the application. And so you got to simplify everything else so it works as a system, and that system works within the greater context of the farm. Because if everything's like its own special snowflake, like the whole operation doesn't work.
The biggest thing for me, and as far as the row shaver and row trimmer go, is need. Not every farmer has weed problems yet. Mother Nature's going to change that course over the next 5 to 10 years. And like I said before, we're going to have to evolve to help the GMO products that we've got going on today. If we can just get rid of those weed escapes that are now passing by the GMO products, if we can get rid of those weed escapes that are causing our herbicides not to work, causing our GMO products not to work, if we can just hold those off, we can keep all of our GMO products going for another 50 years. It's just that simple. It's being able to get people to implement it in time to not stumble over ourselves, which I'll admit, as a farmer, I resisted some things in the past, but I think more people are much more open to a lot of the new technologies today, and they see the broader picture. So,
I would probably say is for us, the cycles of ag make it really hard to develop, right? I only have one shot each season if I'm going to do corn harvest to test the robot during corn harvest. And so I think part of and this is the cool part about the culture and this ag innovation that's going on now, people understand, if I go to Silicon Valley and get funding, they want me to be able to have a 10x, 50x, billion-dollar exit within 3 years, right? That's how the software world has treated people. Ag doesn't work that way. I mean, we have to go through seasons to develop, and so I think it's just a process of, development takes longer when you're building ag equipment. Grain bins are a horrible place for human beings, and they are a horrible place for robots. And so for us to be able to, it just takes a lot of time to build equipment that can stand up to the rigors of ag. And so I think that's really kind of that process, is how do we all work together to make the development of new ideas and new products smoother and easier so that we can take advantage of that ag timing.
I would say from Farm Credit's perspective is sometimes it's not always a blanket solution, a one-size-fits-all for everybody. I know agriculture is a very robust, dynamic industry, and the customer base is not always homogeneous. Every entity and operation and producer has different needs. Some of those needs are very similar. But I think we just have to be very flexible in the solutions that we bring to rural America as well, to make sure that it is scoped in the best way for that individual producer and that operation. So there are some things that we know that hold true, robust risk management plans, marketing plans, access to capital, a healthy balance sheet. Those are all things that sound great, that everybody, those are common issues that every operation will have. But when it comes to innovation, I think you have to know that not every product or every solution is going to be the right fit for every producer, and be okay with that. Mm-hmm. It's really what's best for that operation and what that producer needs.
For sure. Anything to add, Ben, or no? Okay. We will take another question. Who's got another question? Yes.
This is fascinating. I work for Case IH. Of course, I'm an established big corporation. From an entrepreneurial perspective, I have a couple questions. One question is, what is your market? Is it North America? And how are you getting your products out as far as advertising and sales?
The internet. That is my best tool to get the most word out. And believe it or not, Twitter seems to be so ag focused. It's amazing.
Hashtag
I
ag
can-
Twitter.
I can get so much information out in record time, and I've got people that are following us from Australia, from Portugal, from Brazil, in India. I mean, literally all around the world. And a lot of these guys are more of the scientific types that are looking for breakthrough products. And it's amazing how much information you can pass along in a week's time.
Well, I'll answer that on a little different perspective, because we're not to market yet. We're still in the development side of things. We are just going to start focusing on the U.S. market because of the hazardous location challenges inside of a grain bin, the dust explosion. So we have to get the UL certifications, and then we'll probably do Canada because they're very similar in their. So really, as we look, the two pieces that say, okay, focus on the U.S. market first, IP and regulations, and then once we get that done, we'll start thinking about the larger market worldwide. But yeah, it's to try to get through all those certifications to be able to sell a piece of equipment is pretty tough for a small guy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, similarly, we focus on the U.S. first. We think there is a global market, but unless you're doing it really well in one place, you're going to do it poorly everywhere, and we're just not interested in that. So it's a question of sequencing, and as an early stage organization, that's hard because you like go up to the buffet table of opportunities and you want to have a little bit of everything, and it doesn't make for a good meal. So there's a lot of discipline that comes around that. And then, like, in terms of how we go to market, it's important to understand the customer types. You know, like I've seen, you know, a lot of folks who, selling to ag retail, for example, who like want to go to the corporate offices and strike a big deal. And sometimes they do that. And then 2 years later, they're surprised that like nobody's using their product within the local retail shops. And that's because they didn't get local champions. They didn't like go to the ground. So in ag, like literally everything starts from the ground up. So if you want to have sales, if you want to have commercial success, you have to like tailor your product to the needs of like whoever you're serving. And be that a farmer, be that an ag retailer or an applicator. But if you think that the corporate offices are going to get it done, you're going to be sadly mistaken, but you're going to learn that 2 years too late.
Anybody else have questions? Yes.
Kind of going off of that a little bit, that's kind of, there's a lot that goes into bringing out a new product or a new service. Is that something as you guys have gone through or with another innovation that you guys have brought maybe a third-party service in? Or is that something hired onto your team? Are you guys internalizing that? And then maybe what's one of the challenges that you guys have faced kind of coming through this process?
So much of the stuff that we're developing now is new. There are no regulations until you get into the electronics world that really face the products that I'm building. We cut weeds. There's not much simpler than that. And the regulatory side of that world is basically OSHA. And we built a bar that comes down across the front of it. You just got to keep people out of it. That's kind of,
Man,
and I'm
you're
sure
lucky.
the Case IH world is the same way.
You are lucky.
It's that simple. I know the electronic world and especially the aircraft world. I spent 30 years in the aircraft world. You haven't seen paperwork until you fly an airplane, but that's where you guys come in.
Yeah, that's right. Like the regulations are important to follow, but you know on some level it's just paperwork. It doesn't solve any problem. It's one of the 100 things you've got to do, and so you've got to stay just laser focused on what is the problem you're solving, and you know, like who you're going to sell to. It's easy to get distracted, and so just focus on what you're solving, what the customer need is. And like that will drive success. And everything else, you've got to do it. But there's no value in that. It's just something you got to do.
Certification. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Just, we want to prove that our robot's not going to cause any issues inside of the bin, and we got to get it certified. It's a long process, and it's just something you got to drudge through. So that's what we're struggling with right now.
So I think to answer your question about bringing in help, so we've participated in 2 extremely valuable accelerator incubator programs. One, the Ag Launch program out of Tennessee, and that whole process is designed to give you the right support as a small company, young, early development, and then the Combine incubator program in Nebraska, there in Lincoln. And I think it's extremely important for especially folks like us. You know, we're not from ag, so we're learning that. We've never run a startup, so we're learning that. We've never done manufacturing, so we're learning that. So it's just really important for us to find the right people, the right organizations to help us. And we probably have, I don't know that we may have the best network of help because we need so much, right? And we do. We have a really good network of people helping us. And so we haven't had to bring anybody in specifically to help us through a lot of these challenges, but we had to find those services and find the right people. And the biggest help that we've gotten it from any is our farmer network. I mean, you just can't, we would be still building robots in the garage if we didn't have our farmer network, right? Absolutely. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of resources out there that have helped us get to where we are and figure out the business side of things and all of those pieces.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much. Well, everybody, I've got some good news and bad news. The bad news is that we're pretty much out of time for our 1 hour panel. So I'd really like to thank you guys. Again, we've got Dave from Roshaver, Matt from Rantizo, Heidi from Farm Credit, and Chad and Ben from Grain Weevil. So the bad news is that we're out of time, but the good news is that we've got free beer. So if you have more questions or you'd like to talk to any of us, we will all be at the Farm Credit booth from 3:30 to 4:30. Free beer in the Farm Credit booth number 1624. So stop on by. We'll see you there. Thank you guys so much for joining.
And everybody can toast Heidi happy birthday.
You got it in.